Sergio Perez has picked up the pace in Brazil yet again, and while he lost the battle with Alonso, he will very likely keep second place to Hamilton and fulfill the only wish that Red Bull has from him. On top of that, Ricciardo had a horrible weekend for something that wasn't his fault, and while we hoped that he could have had a shot at the Red Bull seat in 2024, confirmations that say otherwise came from all sorts of credible sources. With this in mind, and with how Perez has regained his trust in Red Bull, is Ricciardo's long-awaited tenure now in the past, with how his teammate has performed in Brazil as well? It goes without saying that Sergio Perez had one of the best weekends he could possibly have had in Brazil, especially after completing 2 successful passes on both Mercedes drivers and fighting fiercely with Alonso for the last spot on the podium. With 2 laps remaining, he decided to complete a move on the Spaniard, but was unsuccessful in defending it 1 lap later. So the entire situation boiled down to the last second of the race, where ultimately the 2-time world champion managed to beat the 33-year-old veteran. Nonetheless, this was definitely a plus in Perez's boost for the Drivers' Championship ahead of Hamilton, and with the 2 upcoming races set to favour his car much more than the W14, it would take a miracle for Hamilton to actually dethrone Perez from that second seat. This ultimately means that the Mexican driver will be able to fulfill the only wish that Red Bull had from him to keep the second seat alive, and after Qatar, it seems like the seat was more or less in danger from Horner's quotes. The Brit said multiple times that Perez is in crisis and he desperately needs to regain his old form in order to keep the seat, and while he tried to keep the tensions cool ahead of his home GP, the fact that Marco didn't want to comment on it before the GP is actually done and dusted speaks volumes about where the team used to stand with Perez on this matter. But now everything seems to have changed, and the latest statements from Christian Horner and Helmut Marko are quite encouraging for the future of the Mexican driver. The fact that Hamilton stated it would probably be impossible to overtake Red Bull in both championships in the next 2 years goes to show that the Austrian team may not need another strong driver next to Verstappen, not unless McLaren finds something extraordinary like they did throughout the 2023 season and starts challenging Red Bull more frequently for wins. When talking about the Perez we've seen in Brazil, Horner was full of praise for his driver, as he said, "I thought Checo drove brilliantly well. We had a little bit of a wobble at turn 2, which allowed Fernando, who was very quick on the straights, to have a go at him. He did his best to hang on to it. I think it's great for Checo to outscore Hamilton by 12 points this weekend. It's been a very strong weekend for him. 3rd on Saturday, 4th from 9th on the grid on Sunday. With the yellow flags he got in quali, it's very good points for him. I think it's important for his confidence. I think that was the Checo that we know he's capable of. That will give him just the boost he needs going into another street track where he's always performed well at, in Vegas, and then Abu Dhabi 1 week after." Now, the situation was also very depleted between Perez and Marko, mostly because the veteran Austrian has hinted at Perez's South American heritage as the main factor in his bad results. But the fact that Mexico is in Central America only goes to show that his comment was wrong on so many levels. After understanding that the sport has no place for such comments, Marko had apologized very quickly, but the pressure on Perez's shoulders mounted even further because he then made the infamous statement of not wanting to comment on Perez's future before the Mexican GP. Now, a couple of weeks later, it seems like Perez has done quite enough to keep the entire 2024 season under his belt, and that's something that Daniel Ricciardo will definitely not like. We know for a fact that the return of Ricciardo in AlphaTauri has one sole reason: bringing himself back as the teammate of Verstappen in Red Bull and potentially retiring with the Austrian team. The fact that it was Ricciardo's points in Mexico that brought the team to P8 only goes to show that he has a lot of impact on how the Italian squad is currently progressing. But with Tsunoda finishing P6 and P9 during the sprint race and the main race event respectively, it's only emphasised his importance in the team as well, and the Japanese driver is not ready to give up on his Red Bull quest. He said it the best: the faster driver is going in Red Bull, and right now, even though he has more than double the number of races that Ricciardo has under his belt, Tsunoda has proven to be the faster driver with 13 points compared to Ricciardo's 6. When talking about Perez's future in Red Bull, Sky F1's pundit Martin Brundle has been adamant that there won't be any changes on this field, no matter how much the fans want to see the Honey Badger return to the crime scene he left back in 2018. As he went on to add, I'll stand by what I've said in the last couple of races. I believe Red Bull absolutely want to keep running Perez next year and will do everything to make that happen. This is a contract in place and they don't want to change for any number of reasons. That's what they are aiming at the moment. I've been categorically told by people who know that it's not about finishing second in the championship. He certainly needs to have 3 solid races or where he is at in his own head going forwards. Right now, Perez has the Red Bull seat next year, no doubt about it. Keep in mind that this statement was made prior to the Brazilian GP, one in which Perez has been nothing short of brilliant. So if anything, Red Bull has improved their opinion of the Mexican driver after his last showing. The last 2 races have a street circuit involved as well, and even though it's going to be the first time that the F1 Circus is going to visit this place, we know that Perez has a special performance hidden for these type of tracks, as the only 2 wins that he's scored this season came in Jeddah and Baku. Still, this doesn't mean that Ricciardo won't have a proper chance at the Red Bull seat. The difference is that the competition will be much higher in 2025 than now because of how Lawson has proved to be a crucial talent for Red Bull and because the Austrian team is reluctant to let go of Yuki Tsunoda. After his race in Brazil, which was also very important from how he acted in Mexico in the crash with Piastri, this was definitely a redemption race for the Japanese driver, especially considering the fact that he and Ricciardo have a mission of passing Williams for the P7 in the Constructors' Championship in the last 2 races. If that happens, the team will receive an additional bonus of tens of millions of dollars, and if the rumours are to be believed, the 2024 AlphaTauri car will have a lot of elements from the RB19, which will put both Ricciardo and Yuki much closer to the pack than they are right now. When talking about Ricciardo's impact on AlphaTauri, Horner made sure to pay respect where it's due, as he went on to say, "It's great to see how Daniel is doing in AlphaTauri. They've had a tough earlier part of the year. They've brought in some upgrades, and I think from around Singapore, they've really started to bring their car alive. I think Daniel's put some good engineering direction in there as well, and you can see they are benefiting from that. Yuki drove a strong race today in Brazil, and it's good to see him scoring valuable points." Nonetheless, Red Bull has definitely closed any rumours regarding Perez's seat in 2024, and with how Mercedes performed in Brazil and Hamilton's statements regarding the future of the team, it's safe to assume they wouldn't be that big of a challenge for the Austrian team. With this in mind, everyone who wants to have a sniff at Perez's seat would have to outperform him in a pure matter, or at least prove that they could score solid points in a much inferior car compared to the RB19 and the RB20 in the upcoming season. Do you think that Ricciardo should have a proper shot at the Red Bull seat earlier than 2025? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.